We will wait till 11:05 before starting.
Yeah. I think we'll wait for a few people to join it.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zahra. I'm the co-president of the NESMA Club at GMU, and I'll be co-hosting this session with Munazza.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mananza, and like she said, I'm one of the co-presidents of the GMU Nesma Club. And I'd like to welcome you all to the first GMU Nesma event, which is an online debate on autonomy in public health emergencies.
So this is a two-day session, and the topic for day one is mandatory vaccination. We hope that today's session is very engaging, it's mentally stimulating, and we're looking forward to seeing your participation.
So I'm going to give you guys a brief outline on the event. So we'll start by a guest lecture by Professor Shata. Then we'll move on to presenting the case scenario today, which will be done by Angela, who is the Vice President of the GMU Nesma Club. After that, we will do an initial audience trend poll, which will be followed by the interpanel discussion by our speakers. after which we'll have an open discussion, which we hope everyone joins in on. After which we'll do a final audience trend poll, so we'll see if there is any change in if the speakers basically manage to change your mind about anything, after which we'll do the closing remarks by Angela.
So first ahead is a guest lecture, and the guest lecturer for today is Professor Shata Al-Sharbati. She is the head of community medicine here at GMU. Professor Shata has personally taught me in year 3, and she is amazing. I've enjoyed every single one of her classes. They're very interactive, and I'm looking forward to the session that she's going to have today. She is also the co-author of a number of research articles. Her main focus is on public health, and a lot of her articles have been based on women's health issues. So I'll be giving it over to Professor Shata right now.
Okay.
Hi, Professor Shata.
Hi, hello.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Can you see the? Can you see my? I'm sharing my presentation. Can you see it, please? Yeah.
Is the presentation visible?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for make me share this interesting event. I like debating things, and if it is related to public health, it will be to me a very much interesting topic. Actually, what we are going to, what I'm going to present, just a glimpse of relevant point about how public health people will decide in relation to different ethical related issues. Next, please. These are the objectives. We will speak about moral reasoning, ethical theory, ethical principle, challenges. I will go quickly through these points. Please, next. When you speak about ethics in public health, it is more related to the moral dimension of public health practice. A lot of things we are doing in our practice, but how we can justify what we are doing. We should base our decision based on moral principles, values, and we will speak about these. Some of them theories, we'll speak about these in the coming slides. Next, please. A moral reasoning in public health. Decision in relation to public health can be justified by theories, as we said, principle-based approach, case-based approach, or other approaches. Next, please. Several theories are there. Actually, I select only a few of these theories. There are many. One of the very common theory used to justify a public health decision is what is called deontological theory. It is a duty-based theory, which make people in public health make the right decision. Like, for example, block border, make people do something. This is part helping people on need. These are all part of duty-based theory, which give justification for doing some public health-related decision, regardless the consequence. Next, please. Utilitarian theory look at the decision-making in public health. Actually, this theory look at the consequence, the latest consequence of what the decision-making in relation to public health issue will lead. For example, the topic in relation to vaccination, the topic in relation to quarantine, a lot of topic in public health, although it can affect the autonomy of people or can affect the ethical aspect related to freedom of people. but justification can be the end point of this decision making will be the social goodness or the benefit of the society. So the consequence of the action is justified by utilitarian theory. Next. There are other theory that I have not mentioned. Actually, there are many. Let's go to principle, ethical principle. Actually, there are many also ethical principle. I select 4 very important ethical principle. You will find them also in ethics in relation to research, but now our topic is ethics in relation to public health decision making and practice. So the first moral principle is autonomy. Next, please. Which means the free choice of subject, the right to decide whether to take that decision or not to take that decision. And this is very important right of a human being to do things which they feel it's right. We have autonomy in relation to a lot of decision we are making, for example, smoking, lifestyle. You will go for physical activity or not, you will sleep or not, you will take a smoke or not, you will do a lot of things in your life. This is part of your freedom to take that decision or not, or to participate in research if it is relation to research or not. This is part of autonomy of people have. The other principle is benefices, which involve both protection of individual welfare and promoting the common welfare, which means the society welfare. Because the benefit should not be on individual base, although many people will think about what benefit me, what I will get. But if you look on from a public health point of view, it will be both what the individual will get out of that decision, what the society will get of that decision. So this will motivate public health people to do a lot of decision in timely manner, because this will be with the welfare of the society, the benefit of the society. Like lock down the border of UAE. That decision was taken because it is beneficial for people living in UAE. So to reduce the risk. Next. Non-malfeasance, which means actually that principle comes from Hippocrates, and it requires that any individual should not do harm to other people. Actually, a lot of decision taken by healthcare provider and relation based on this principle. We should not, actually, this is a very, very important principle. If you cannot benefit people, at least don't harm them. Okay. The other principle is justice, which means equal distribution of benefit and burden among the population, which indicate equitable selection of people for participation in vaccination, participation in quarantine, participation of screening. Now screening, they are doing screening. You should not select just few people for whom, although another thing, which is the benefit, can justify the benefit and risk taking, because each principle has a point to when you select that. In justice, you treat people either equally or give people who need more, give them more. Okay, this is the idea of justice, which look at equality of right of people, equality of benefit and risk also, and equity, which look at give people who need more of the benefit. Yes, next. To ethical theory related to justice, egalitarian theory said give equal share, that equal benefit or equal risk to everyone, while social justice theory give people more, those who need more, give them more. Okay, like give elderly people more care when you decide to admit to hospital people at risk. Now they are following that. People who are admitted in the hospital, those who are having higher risk. Although all people may have positive PCR for COVID-19, but they give more to people who need. Next, please. Next. Other theory, principle of least restriction, reciprocal theory, obligation to provide information to people in return of their compliance. This is transparency, includes the stakeholder. Next. Next, please. Apart from these principles, there are sometimes we treat case by case according to the circumstances of that case. So sometimes decision making in relation to public health based on the decision or circumstances of the condition. This is especially in case of unexpected event like COVID-19 or outbreak, food poisoning outbreak. A lot of decision has been taken by public health people based on a decision taken in a previous year. At this year, that was the decision, and to justify whatever public health decision. Other approach such as the right-based theory, ethics of care, virtue ethics, and actually sometimes there is a disagreement between like the giving the right of the society, would it override the right of individual? So when there is disagreement between different values and the principle, decision will be taken based on the circumstances of that case. Yes, next. I just want to attract your attention. Many of the public health decision making now supported by legal, political decision making. Like a lot of now in relation to COVID-19, it is supported by higher level authority support. That's why they put penalty. They put this is in relation to various things, not only COVID-19, speeding, driving during driving. A lot of things that to make people do the right thing. Ethical challenges in public health. There are different challenges in public health. This is a dual obligation of the public health people to respect autonomy of people and to respect the right of the society. Next. Please, next. The other challenges which also in public health is to make a right decision in response to public health threat, like what we have now. So actually there are some what we call it values that can justify public health decision making. When people in public health authority, they will decide on behalf of all people. Like utilitarian that we have mentioned, paternalistic, communitarism. Yes, next. Actually, for paternalism, which means that the public health people will act as a parent, like a parent in a family. The parent will decide on behalf of the children. I'm not saying the whole society, like the children, they have no right. This is not the case, but they will decide about the best benefit, the best thing to be done in relation to the public, based on benefit and risk, not risk of individual, but benefit and risk of the whole society. This is what is called paternalism. So paternalism, to be act in ethical, there should be imminent threat to the illness caused by, for example, infectious disease and whatever intervention they justify, there is good evidence that the whatever decision making is effective. Like for example, when they said people should stay at home, okay, no individual should move except the healthcare provider. This happened in the beginning when they locked down borders. So they decide that what is the benefit for the society based on risk and benefit, and taking the best avenue from other experience. Next, please. Next. Yeah. Utilitarian, this is what we have mentioned. The consequence of end communitarianism. This is for a community interest, to look at what is the best for the community, what is the best for the society in relation to human well-being. So a political decision will consider that. Next, please. Justice. This is another issue, another aspect that need to be looked at in public health decision making. Although we have mentioned justice is one of the principle of moral thing in public health, but when it reaches to decision making about the society, they should look at what is social justice, what is the right of the health, what is disparity in access to healthcare, disparity in health status, because all these points may affect justice, what we have mentioned in relation to equality, or give more people who are in need, to give them more. Next, please. Yeah, health promotion, a lot of health promotion activity, like for example, vaccination, health promotion activity related to the obligation to put seat belt. These are for the benefit of people. People in RTI, they will get nothing if we put, like I'm speaking about material, they will not get any benefit whether we put a seat belt or not. This is for our benefit, for the society, so the individual will be protected. And in addition, there are a lot of requirements in relation to car, which can protect the benefit of the society. When we renew our car license, they look at these requirements. So some benefit for individuals, some benefit for the society. These are all ensured by the policy taking, and of course, these are all based on public health principles, which we have talked about. Next, please. Next, requirement of informed consent. We know informed consent is a requirement for any research, but sometime in research done by public health authority, they may ask ethics committee to waiver the requirement of informed consent. For example, when they are doing vaccination, they will do vaccination without asking informed consent from the parent, or they will do, for example, surveillance. They will take data from us when we go to any department, any health authority. They will take our age, our gender, whatever information from us. A lot of information we are providing every year. This is a part. Most of this information, if it's governmental, they don't take the ethical approval for that. Next, please. Yeah. There are some ethical justification for intervention by public health authority that justify the right to restrict individual autonomy. The case as what your colleague will present. Public health justification if the morbidity or mortality associated with that problem is high. Effectiveness or evidence for effectiveness of that intervention is there, like for example for vaccination. Necessity of this measure to each individual. Proportionality, which means that the benefit outweighs the risk or the disadvantage. Restriction. Autonomy is disadvantage for individual, but the benefit for the society and for individual is higher. Least infringement, which means that they restrict autonomy, but it should not be very high restriction if the condition wouldn't require. So It is, next please, it is based on the condition that the public health decision was taken for. The other ethical values, what is called duty-based theory, which required health profession to respond to those who are suffering. Equity, we have mentioned about equity, which means that to give equal share, while equality, equity to give people more, those who are in need, while equality to give equal share. Individual liberty, which means the autonomy of individual privacy. Although you are collecting data from people, although you are asking people to give some information, but it should not, you should do it in a private place. Like you should not ask people about their, for example, you ask female about their age in front of everyone. Some female wouldn't like to speak about their age. Protection from harm, also this is also public health ethics foundation principle and obligation to protect public health and serious harm. Reciprocity, which means that to comply people to protect people who are in need. You know, you have to put on mask. You are young, you may not be harmed too much when you will get COVID-19 because you are young. The complication is very less. I'm not encouraging you to put off mask. I'm not intend to do that, but I'm just discussing some ethical and moral issue, value issue. But the benefit will be more for older people like me, because when individual like me will get COVID-19, the consequences and the risk will be much higher. So it is an obligation, whatever the society giving to you in terms of protecting you, raising up you, a lot of benefit you are getting out of society. This is just returning to the society some of the benefit you are getting by protecting people vulnerable. Okay, next. Many questions need moral reasoning to justify public health action. I put it like a question, so just to make you think about this debatable thing. Does society responsibility equal paternalism? Which means that do society have a right at each time to behave like a parent, or it is just when it is needed? Does the freedom of individual equal rejection of responsibility of state toward health? Do we need to informed consent for all public health intervention? And I have mentioned some exemption which we don't need informed consent. Do individual right overrides social responsibility? This is actually one of our debate. The precautionary principle equal must zero risk of new medication, which means that a lot of medication now provided for COVID-19. Should you try it based on zero risk, or should you try when there is emergency oblige you to do that? Try to get the best treatment. Okay, this is more or less with risk and benefit analysis. What is equity in health? What is adequacy on funding? How we fund the public health? A lot of debatable thing in relation. You know, public health services, the benefit is not like a treatment. A lot of prevention, you will pay a lot for public health prevention, but the benefit will be for the society. Would that matter? Would that be important? Next. Thank you very much for your listening. Thank you. I finish.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and like being there for us and being so supportive during the process.
Thank you. Welcome.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Shata. Good morning, everyone. I hope you are all doing well. So for today's debate, the case presented is a fictional scenario based on information taken from 3 reference articles from CDC and the JAMA network. So the case is as follows. A 7-year-old girl is brought to a New York City emergency with high fever and a rash. The physician determines she has measles, places the child in isolation, and immediately notifies the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. While doing background checks on the patient's mother tells the physicians that the child has not been vaccinated due to religious reasons. She was also recently in a school camp. The patient was shifted to PICU on development of pneumonia and passed away a week later from nosocomial sepsis. The child's contacts included 100 of her school contacts and 20 relatives and neighbors, of whom about 88% were unvaccinated. The outbreak spread, and in 3 months' time, 1,012 cases were reported, of which 75% occurred in unvaccinated children aged less than 15 years from the same religious community. So the motion for this debate is the government should legally mandate vaccinations for infectious diseases and penalize those who refuse to vaccinate. Those who are in support for this motion stand with the statement that yes, the government should legally mandate vaccinations and penalize those who refuse to vaccinate. Those against the motion stand with no, the government should not legally mandate vaccinations nor penalize those who refuse to vaccinate.
So we'll be having the initial.
So we'll be starting with an initial poll. We'll be putting up the poll, and you guys all will decide whether you stand in support for or against the motion that Angela has just discussed. After which we'll also be doing a follow-up poll after the discussion to see if any of the speakers have convinced to change your mind. So please, please vote. This will be up for 1 minute.
I'm actually surprised with the results. We'll be sharing the results at the end to compare between the initial and final poll. But I'm genuinely surprised to see right now.
Yeah.
Was not expecting this, but this will make things interesting. So hopefully we'll have a lot of interaction during the audience session to see why people have chosen what they've chosen. To anyone who hasn't, to anyone who hasn't voted, please, you can do so right now. All right.
Okay, so we'll be closing.
All right, so the first initial poll has been closed. We'll be moving on to the interpanel discussion. The interpanel discussion is where our speakers will be giving us their stance on the motions on the sides that they've chosen. We have 5 speakers for the day, 3 for and 2 against, and the speakers will be going in the order. Speaker 1 will be for the motion, speaker 2 will be against the motion. There is no rebuttal, meaning that they cannot interact or oppose each other during their allotted times. So each speaker will be speaking for 2 minutes. I just want to tell the audience members that because we want this to be interactive, and we do have an open discussion session which will be followed immediately after the interpanel discussion. If you have any questions, any oppositions to what the speaker is saying that you would like to raise, I would encourage you to put them in the question box and we will read them out later and give you a chance to join in the discussion. So please do that. For the speakers, please keep in mind the guidelines that you've been given. If you stray from any of the guidelines, you will be given verbal cues and prompts to remind you to get back into your lane. Apart from that, just please enjoy, and I hope we see some really interesting viewpoints from our speakers. So we'll move on to our first speaker. So our first speaker is Fatima Sheikh Khater. Hi, Fatma.
Hello.
All right, Fatma, so I'll be starting your timer right now.
Okay. Benjamin Franklin, scientist of the American Enlightenment era, in his autobiography said, "I lost one of my sons by smallpox and I regretted bitterly that I had not given it to him by inoculation." According to the WHO, vaccination is known to be one of the most effective health interventions. Under the UAE law, vaccination is a child's birthright and avoiding it is a negligence from the parent's side. Yet there is some presence of hesitancy and questions on why must some vaccines be mandatory among the population. According to WHO Vaccine Safety Basics Manual, fear of autism, potential high levels of adverse reactions, and toxic ingredients have been the common worries of the growing vaccine-hesitant people. But all of the fears and concerns mentioned are scientifically proven to be theoretical but not factual. WHO Vaccine Safety Basics Manual also mentions various studies that have been proven vaccines provide herd immunity to a community that has a higher number of vaccinated people, which safeguards people who unfortunately cannot take vaccines due to reasonable exemptions like allergy and anaphylactic reactions. Leaving mandated vaccines to be a choice of the people is dangerous and can bring back eradicated infectious diseases. WHO Bulletin mentions that vaccines have shown to reduce unseen economic burdens and has overall increased population productivity. They prevent cancers, increase life expectancy, reduce antibiotic resistance, promote women empowerment, and much more. Vaccines, hence, are effective and have a favorable risk-benefit ratio. And from a religious point of view, according to an article from 2016 by Croatian Medical Journal, taking anything that will help for the greater good for the community would be allowed it. Liberty and freedom of choice becomes selfishness if your choice can potentially put innocent people's lives at stake. As long as the evidence speaks to the favorable risk-benefit ratio of these vaccines, we should stay advocating vaccines and bust unneeded fears amongst the general public. Thank you, and I urge you to vote for the greater good.
Thank you, Fatima. We'll be moving on to the first speaker for the against motion, which is Selma.
Hi, Selva, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, Selva, I'm going to start your timer right now.
All right. We live in societies where education is available to everyone and in fact is mandated. Everyone is well aware of the side effects of vaccinations as well as the consequences of not being vaccinated, hence are capable of making informed decisions. Whether a person should or should not be administered with vaccination must be one's responsibility and own decision. If vaccination is to be mandated, exemption should be allowed based on religion. According to an article published by the Croatian Medical Journal about religious reasons behind refusing vaccine, Protestantism claims that vaccination is an act of interfering with divine providence. Those who actually vaccinate their children are consider side effects of vaccination as a God sign that they have made a wrong decision. And according to an article published by the CDC regarding the outbreak that took place in Israel, the outbreak started with 2 people who came in from measles-affected communities in the northern district. Both were unvaccinated and came into Jerusalem in August of 2018. Had the government been more attentive and taking measures to ensure these people were isolated and ensure them being not infected or carrying the disease before letting them engage with the society, the outbreak could have been prevented or even controlled. And the Japanese few tend to reject all biomedical practices and technologies or effects, and then they are considered as unnatural. This is very obvious in the case of organ transplant and vaccination. Everyone should have their own decision made by their own beliefs, and everyone should respect that. No one should force anyone to go against their own beliefs and religions.
Thank you, Salwa. Yeah, so we'll be moving on to the next speaker for the day, which is Ada. Hi, Ada.
Hi, you can hear me?
All right. Yeah.
Yes, Ada. I'll be starting your timer right now.
Okay. So vaccinations are usually made mandatory in countries who are seeing a decline in immunization rates and vaccine coverage or during outbreaks of infectious diseases. According to a CDC report, 10 great public health achievements worldwide between the year 2001 and 2010, vaccine preventable diseases were number 2 on the list, stating that expanded vaccination coverage is one of the most cost-effective ways to advance global welfare. And in 2019, WHO named vaccine hesitancy as one of the 10 greatest threats to global health. Looking at countries which already had vaccine mandates implemented in the past, one such study was published in Eurosurveillance in 2019. It assessed the impact of vaccination mandates on vaccination coverage after 1 year of implementation in France. And they reported that there was a sharp increase in meningococcal C vaccination coverage among infants between the year 2017 to 2018, and the increase was almost 36%. And that resulted in a decrease in invasive meningococcal C diseases. Additionally, they also reported that vaccination coverage increased for non-mandatory vaccines, as well as in older individuals who were not covered in the mandated vaccination. This was because the government established a governmental website which was dedicated specifically for vaccination, which provided common questions, answers on vaccines and vaccinations. Now, this emphasizes that along with the governmental mandation of vaccines, there should be information strategies which improve trust, access, and affordability of vaccines for everyone. And if the risk to health is extremely high, the government should have the option to implement mandation to protect the community from a current risk or any potential risk in the future.
Thank you, Ada. We'll be moving on to the next speaker for the day, which is for the against motion, Najia. Hi, Najia, can you hear us?
Hi.
Hi. Zahra, will you be starting the timer?
Yes. Najia, are you ready?
Yes.
All right.
Okay, so I speak against the government legally mandating vaccines for infectious diseases because it overrides individual liberty and bodily autonomy. Because mandatory vaccination is an instance of coercive policies, and policies become coercive when significant penalties are attached to non-vaccinations. And this leads to withholding of valuable social goods or services from families who choose not to vaccinate their children for non-medical reasons. So it is important to determine how well vaccine mandates are ethically justified, because justifications cannot be based on general claims just about the importance of public health. Because as certain vaccine preventable diseases are declining, the need and reason for people to be coerced into vaccines also becomes insignificant. So for this reason, it is important for public health officials to support their mandatory vaccine programs with justifiable arguments rather than simply citing legal precedent or historical tradition in support of their exercise of power. Because usually the typical counter argument given by the public health officials is to point out that one's decision to vaccinate, unlike one's decision to undergo surgery or not, affects the health of the others in the community. But it also appears that the public health authorities in the United States may have become complacent in their efforts to promote vaccination. As long as vaccination is compulsory, there is little need seen to inform and educate the public. So another point that I'd like to add is that the US Constitution states clearly in the 14th Amendment, which asserts that no state shall make or enforce any law abridging the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States or deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. Yet, in 1922, the court ruled that a school system could refuse admission to a student who did not meet vaccination requirements, and this singling out of a particular class of individuals would not be a violation of the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Najia. We'll be moving on to the next speaker for the day, who'll be speaking in support for mandatory vaccinations. Therese.
Hi, Therese.
Can you see me?
No.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So can I start?
I'll be starting. Yes.
Okay. So I totally believe that mandating vaccinations greatly reduces infection rates for the diseases the vaccines protect against. I would like to talk briefly about the Philadelphia measles outbreak, in which over 1,400 people became sick with measles only because of a faith healing church that actively discouraged its parishioners from vaccinating their children. Following this, a court order was obtained to forcibly vaccinate children whose parents would not agree to seek medical care. The US Department of Health and Human Services states vaccines are some of the safest medical products available, and that most childhood vaccines are 90 to 99% effective in preventing disease. CDC notes that many vaccine preventable diseases are still in the US or only a plane ride away. They have not come to a complete halt and can only be eradicated by mandating vaccinations, if possible, worldwide. Deadly diseases like meningitis strike without any warning, and vaccination has proved to be the only way to prevent it. When vaccination rates decline, we start to see a resurgence of these infectious diseases. When parents choose not to vaccinate their children, it puts the most vulnerable in the community at an increased risk of contracting infectious diseases. Vaccine hesitancy can only be dealt with proper educational interventions. So, I would like to conclude by saying that the legislation of a country has a dramatic effect in controlling the spread of an infectious disease. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all our speakers. We had some really interesting points made, from religious rights to exemptions being made on medical grounds, as well as points made on how mandatory vaccinations might not be the best way to go, with the best way being non-coercive means, increasing awareness, and other such things. Now, I would like to open the session to our audience members. Anyone who would like to join in, add comments, speakers, you can direct questions to the opposition or add to the discussion. Please raise your hand so that I can unmute you and allow you to join in. Kulsum.
Hi.
Yes, Kulsum,
I'm Kulsum Imran, and I have a question for all the negative speakers who were against vaccination. I have a very simple question, that is, if not for vaccination, what is the alternative method to eradicate infectious diseases? And how did they justify that due to vaccination, infectious diseases like mumps, rubella, polio, all of this was eradicated?
the speakers, anyone who wants to answer it, can please raise their hand. Kulsum asked this specifically for the against speakers.
Yes.
I'll be unmuting all the panelists right now, so panelists, please join in. Speakers, anyone who would like to?
Okay, I'd like to say that vaccinations, yes, they are helpful and they are the best way to eradicate diseases such as that. But the point here was whether making it mandatory is legal and if it is working out well. But it doesn't work out well because it takes away your liberty and your autonomy. And like I mentioned also in my points, that there are parents who are hesitant, or there are people who are hesitant to get vaccinated because they are not fully informed by it, and they don't have all the information regarding it, and they might be also influenced by peers around them, and a lot of physicians also are not able to answer their questions well enough for them to be able to make a decision if this is good enough for them. And yes, so basically raising more awareness and on this could help in getting more people vaccinated than coercive policies playing a role in it.
Yeah, I agree with you at the end that making more awareness about it, making like a whole campaign about it, or making promoting it,
Yes.
creating awareness about it. But I highly encourage that government should legalize vaccination, because there are some people who did not do it because of religious reasons, and so and so and so. They should be educated that this is for the greater good, the utilitarian approach, I guess, that the greater good for society, and that's the approach we should take. That's it.
Thank you, Kulsum. And thank you, Najia. I'll be unmuting Professor Gomati. Hi, Dr. Gomati.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you everyone for such a lovely, discussion. And I think your points have been very, very interesting and very well put. My only question is, what happens for the time that it takes from when you have evidence to the time when it takes to educate the public? It's a gap. It's a big gap. And sometimes you need to take decisions, and as Dr. Professor Shata very well put it, in the greater good, because not everyone understands the results, the information that's coming out. For every piece of information there is a piece of misinformation floating around. So who is going to sift which is the right or the wrong? So we need to sometimes leave it to the experts. If we expect that every person on common man should be able to sift between what's the correct information and the misinformation, it's going to be very hard. Even there are things which even being in the field sometimes find difficult to distinguish which is the right thing. So imagine somebody somewhere has to put all the evidence into account and take very, very strong evidence-based decisions. And so I think we sometimes need to leave it to the thing. So I am with the people who are for the thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Gomati.
Thank you for joining the session, ma'am.
Most welcome. Very interesting indeed. Carry on. I'm still here.
Okay, we have one more person who's asking a question. Who'll be asking a question? I'll be unmuting Alvaro.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for organizing this debate. I'm really happy to be participating and hearing all of your guys' arguments. I just have a question, perhaps for both teams, about the question of penalizing. Why would the fourth team support penalization, and what would be an appropriate way of penalizing those that do not go with mandatory vaccination? And for the against team, how, if you don't penalize, then even if you educate people, you're not perhaps incentivizing enough the vaccination campaign. So why wouldn't you penalize in this case?
Can I answer for the four?
I'm sorry, Fatma?
Can I answer for the question that he's asked for the four members?
Yes, of course. Yes.
Okay. So by penalizing, we don't mean putting them in jails. that is too much. That is too far. We can't go that far. It does not help anybody. It only increases people who will become more against towards doing vaccinations if we were to penalize them so far that we'll put them in jails. But penalizing in the sense like Dr. Shata said, that we can give them fines, in the sense we have given car fines for like speeding or like seat belts and stuff like that. These actually affect other people, so we give them fines there. So that could be a way of penalizing. But what we usually do in the government is that they don't let you get into schools unless you have appropriate vaccinated children, or they don't let you give the benefits that you would get if you are vaccinated. So that's one way of penalizing. We don't do like really extreme levels of penalization. It's just like we don't let them do the things that normal people will do if they were to vaccine. Hope I answered the question. You can ask again if you want.
Would anyone from the academic side would like to answer Laura's question?
Yes. So about not penalizing people who don't opt for vaccines, it's because sometimes people do not opt for vaccines because they are concerned about the safety and the long-term or short-term effects that it could have. And a lot of times, the long-term effects are not known by the researchers or people who are implementing these laws, or the ones who are giving out the vaccine, because it hasn't been administered yet. So even though the government does establish programs like a no-fault compensation, but at the end of the day, no amount of money can compensate for the loss of a child or the permanent physical or mental disability that the child would have to endure for the rest of his life. And yeah, I think that is one point. That also another point is that a lot of sometimes people do not have access, people who are under the poverty line, or people factors such as socioeconomic factors, and some ethnic minorities would not have access to these vaccines, and penalizing them, like I stated before, that the US doesn't allow admissions into schools. So penalizing them for not getting vaccines when they can't actually afford it is not okay.
Can I object to what my dear opponent said? Like, I want to ask a question that I had when he was
please.
speaking.
Yeah, go on.
Okay, so in the US, you're mentioning US, which I find very interesting, because around 45 states, if I'm not wrong, they allow religious exemptions, right? So because of that, there was a reason. Because of that, we had like the measles outbreak or many of the other outbreaks because of the religious exemptions. So you're saying that the US does not allow, but then there are like exemptions in many of the states for religious and even personal beliefs in some of the states, if I'm not wrong. So, and also she mentioned very interesting, she said about death. Has there been any recorded deaths because of a vaccine? Because I haven't read any single articles about that, and I would like to see something that has said that there have been deaths because of the vaccines, related to the vaccines, not because of other reasonings.
Okay, so there have not been any recorded deaths because it is very hard to relate the death, or the deaths related. I mean, it is very hard to correlate if the death was from the vaccine, because it is sometimes just termed as a coincidence after the vaccine is administered. So a lot of times these have not been recorded, and every time these have been brought to the attention of the health professionals, a deaf ear has been turned to this, and it's not been taken into consideration. That's why there are not a lot of studies on this, and even though there have been some trials for it, they're still not able to prove if deaths are actually caused by the specific vaccine. So that, and the other point that you said about religious exemptions, yes, it is there, but there also it used to be there, and there was a huge, like you said, there was an outbreak because of it, and a lot of people were using just religious exemptions to just not get vaccines, and there was a very large decline. There was a huge decline in the number of people being vaccinated between a few years, but that is actually being looked at, and they are trying to change that, because now they require the people who want religious exemption and even philosophical exemption to actually state and express it in a much better way, and they're making this much harder for them to just get exempted.
Thank you, Najia, and thank you, Fatma, for adding on to Alvara's question. Yes, Professor Shita.
Sorry, I just want to one comment. Actually, the, the decision taken based on the on the risk. So for some vaccination, they will not look at it in the same way for other vaccination. For example, although as a policymaker, they may put a restriction of a privilege given to people to make people do the right thing. The same as you said, you referred to that. You cannot get into school unless you will be vaccinated. So this restriction of privilege against asking people to do the right thing, not a penalty, only restriction of privilege. So if they want to, sometime for some incident, they will allow the same as what you have said. They allow people with the religious. In US, many states they give right to people with a religious reason to, but they have to write statement. They are responsible for not only the health of their children, but any incidents that occur because of that decision, they are responsible. So anyone who got measles can put a claim on them, and he can get a compensation for that. So this is a way how public health people will decide. Okay, sometime, okay, you want to not to vaccinate, okay, don't vaccinate. This is what is happening in US. But any incident will occur, anyone can put a claim on you, and you have to pay everyone who got the disease. So this is a way how to encourage people to do right thing, deprive from privilege, or make them put a statement, and so that give a responsibility to take in case of complications. So these are different way how public health people will make the population or encourage people to do the right thing for the welfare of the society. Thank you very much. I want to thank all organizer or audience and everyone participant in that event, plan it. It is a very interesting forum. Thank you very much for inviting me and making me part of this activity. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Shata.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
We have Dr. Lamise in the webinar session. Dr. Lamise has taught us medical ethics, and I would really love it if, ma'am, you could add your views.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you?
We're good, ma'am. How are you?
Good afternoon. We are good. How are you?
I hope you are all safe. Alhamdulillah. God bless all of us, inshallah.
Inshallah.
So I have here one comment on the session about the autonomy principles to be followed in vaccinations. So we all know that autonomy is one of the main ethical principles which we have to follow in the practice. And we all know that we cannot force anyone to do anything which he or she does not feel that it is in his own or her own best of interest. And that's why there are forms in the hospitals and the institutes which is known as LAMA, like left against medical advice. So if the patient is not willing to do a certain operation or to do a certain surgery, he still have the right to refuse. But at the same time, as Dr. Shatta said, that he or she has to sign a form which clarifies that he is carrying the full responsibility about any risks or complications that are going to happen later on. So if we are following this in surgeries and in operations which are quite, like we can say that like they are life-threatening. So what about vaccination? Vaccination is still considered as preventive measures, which we cannot guarantee that the person may carry this infection or may got this infection. And upon this basis, we cannot force him or her, because simply, as we all know, some people still have some religious beliefs which believe in that God is the only protector and the creator who creates us. If he likes to give us some health troubles, he will give us if we took the vaccine or if we did not take the vaccine. So still we are going to face some mentalities and some religious concerns about that. And for that, we are going to put the legalizations and the penalties, and we are going to do health education settings. And we are trying to convince the people that this is important and this is mandatory. And one more thing, the principle of utility, as we discussed before, the greatest good for the greatest number of population. If I allow this person or this patient not to take the vaccine, then what about if he is going to be infected and at the same time, definitely he is going to infect others also. So we are not speaking only about a person's health, but we are speaking about others' health as well. So I feel that still this issue is a big dilemma in the clinical practice. And still we need to put the legalizations and the laws to enforce the concept of autonomy and to let people understand well that yes, we are respecting your opinion and you have the right to do so. And there are forms and applications to be signed by the patient to clarify or to secure the physician position or the country or the government position that we clarified the thing and still he or she is refusing to take the vaccine. But at the same time, how to ensure that he is not going to harm others? How to ensure that this is not against the principle of utility or utilitarism, which is one of the most important ethical principles, again, to be followed in the clinical practice. So in my point of view, I feel that it is still one big dilemma that we have to discuss and gather all the aspects in order to reach to a rule or a legalization which can help us to follow these ethical principles and at the same time protect the public and protect the physicians from any claims of negligence or malpractice. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lomis.
Thank you. Anyone wants to answer me or interact with me or oppose me? I don't know.
Just a small comment. In relation to vaccinations, some people refuse vaccination not based on religious base. Religious, understandable, like some, it is very strong values based on some moral, ethical background. It may be difficult to override by some people. That's why they give their right to sign a paper. But some people refuse to vaccinate based on unevidence-based information, like, you know, especially for measles vaccine, the case of measles vaccine, because of one article published 20 years ago, 20 years back, relation to link between autism and measles. This encouraged thousands of a parent to decide not to vaccinate their children. And then WHO, this make WHO do randomized clinical trial, global randomized clinical trial, and prove that this is not true. So if it is based, you can justify if it is based on some moral strong, and give them the right to sign and be responsible for that. But some people will do a decision not based on evidence. So for that case, the public health people may go for another option, which is the best for the society. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shatta. We will be moving on to the final poll.
So again, it's the same poll, but this is just to see if anyone has changed their opinion, if there's been a shift. Do we have any bats amongst us? We had a really interesting conversation during the open discussion. I think personally, as like a healthcare professional, while I do have to stand for vaccinations because vaccinations are for the greater good and vaccinations have reduced mortality rates drastically, there's a lot of different factors that need to go into it when we're thinking about it, like the socioeconomic situations, the political situations, the cultural background of why a community is refusing to vaccinate their children. And also, to what extent do parents have rights to control medical decisions for their children? Because at the end of the day, we always say that parents know best. Can we consider vaccinations as neglect? There's a lot of things to think about, and I hope that this expands your mind a little bit more. If anyone's not voted, please do it right now.
All right. So it was a great session, I must say. Thank you to each and every one of you who joined in with us today, all the speakers, the audience members, faculty members. It was quite a stimulating session, really, and everyone portrayed great enthusiasm and energy throughout the event, which and all of you helped this make event helped make this event possible. Those support emphasize how mandated both the sides made use of equally emotional and strong narratives. So thank you, everyone. And now let's see how this debate has taken shape with the final poll reveal.
Please give me a minute.
I'd just like to say that we've had some very interesting questions. Unfortunately, we do not have the time to discuss each and every one of them. So
Drum rolls, I guess. Let's see what the trend reveals. So the initial trend was that 90% were in support of the motion, in support for mandating and penalizing individuals who refuse to vaccinate, and 16% were against it. 10% were against it, sorry. And in the final trend, we see a switch to 6% of the people changing sides to go towards against the motion, which is really interesting, and I was not expecting this.
Yeah,
So
sure, definitely, honestly. I did not expect that.
For today's session, the against speakers have managed to convince.
So congrats to the speakers.
I'll unmute all the speakers and the professor and Professor Shata.
Yeah, congratulations for the opponent.
Thank you.
I think you were very convincing. That's why some people decided to switch. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
We would just like as organizers, we would just like to say that in no way or form do we support the anti-vaxxers movement. And the anti-vaxxers movement has had a really negative impact. You can just look at it in terms of outbreaks that have happened, and it's very fundamental to increasing distrust towards the medical community, which becomes an issue not within vaccination, but outside. But this discussion was just to have a healthy interaction and see both the viewpoints, and none of the against speakers have raised any, they haven't raised a stance saying that we should do away with vaccinations in general. It's just about what the extent of penalizing or what the extent of mandating vaccinations should be.
I just want to comment. The idea of debate is to have skill of convincing people. I discuss with the team that although always we want to see the right thing to be done, the right thing, but the idea of debating is to have that skill, to convince people about your point. And as a future healthcare provider or decision maker, we look at you, you are young, you will be leading the society within coming years. So we look at you, how you convince others with your point, how you convince. This is the idea of debating. Try to collect evidence and try to support your point of view with evidence. Thank you very much for both sides.
Thank you, Dr. Shata. I'd like to thank everyone for attending our day one of the debate, and thank you to Professor Shata for taking time out of her schedule. I'd also like to thank Professor Manta and Professor Gomati for their encouragement, and Mr. Suraj for helping us set up the webinar and ensuring a smooth flow.
Thank you very much. It was a very good debate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So thank you all for attending day one. We will look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Tomorrow's session is on mandatory quarantine, and our guest lecturer is Dr. Janita. She's the assistant professor for microbiology. It's going to be a very interesting session, and I hope you all log in.
Yeah, hope to see you all tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and have a nice day.
Thank you.